I am here to give you an update on what the task force has been doing for the last 6 months. So just a quick chronology. In November 2017, the joint councils met, and at that point, they gave approval for NCLA to explore the need for an expanded library. And that's what it was to explore an expanded library, not to make a decision to build or rebuild or tear down. And in subsequent conversations, Los Altos City gave us some general guidelines, and one of the parameters was that the library stay at the same location, that we do not ask to move it to any place else in the city, and that in order for it to go forward, that there would not be any cost to the city. So if NCLA and other funding bodies could find the funding, that the city council would then consider going forward with building a library if it was determined it was needed. So our request tonight is that the council approve a concept to continue exploring the potential of a redeveloped library. We are not asking for any funds. We are just asking for the authorization to continue to go forward with our exploration. We have 3 funding agencies right now: the Friends of the Library, NCLA, and the Los Altos Library Endowment, which is also known as Lolly, not the candy bar. And all 3 of those agencies have been and are currently supporting the project, both financially and with volunteer hours. All 3 of those groups want to continue to go forward with the project if the council gives the authorization to investigate and to explore the possibility.
And then the next question is, how much funds are available to continue this exploration?
Let me answer the last one first, because I have that number off the top of my head. The Lolly has allocated $150,000 if the measure is put on the ballot, because the library or the city cannot spend the money based on the law. But so Lolly has put forward that money if it does come to a ballot, and we have spent. I think so far we've spent. Is it correct that we spent $78,000? Right. So that is for the needs assessment, the architectural survey to look at the structure of the building. Because one of the things that we looked at was, could we do an add-on, and what kind of square footage would that add-on give us, or what was a tear down and a rebuild. And then we also did the Godby survey. So the monies were the needs assessment and the building architectural survey were split 3 ways between Lolly, NCLA, and the Friends, so that was a shared cost. And the Godby survey was funded by NCLA.
I think it'd be helpful if you could describe how the next steps and how that's going to be funded, because again, I think we're not asking the city to put any money forth.
Correct.
And I don't think that point has necessarily been made clear.
I'll be clear. The next step would be to hire a consultant for 2 to 3 months, and that would be funded by NCLA.
I'm trying to figure out how many parcel taxes we currently have. It looks like there's a current parcel tax of $33.66 and another JPA $76 per parcel. Am I reading that right? Can somebody enlighten me on what's already out there and what they're for?
Nancy Howe, who is our county director of the library system.
Thank you.
I can only answer one of those numbers. The $33 was passed in 2013. It applies to, it's a community facilities district tax that passed in our district to augment library services, and that's been in place for 20 years.
Okay, and so that was passed and applies not just in Los Altos, that applies in the entire district.
The entire district.
Got it. Okay.
Second parcel tax?
Can I answer that question?
Sure, anybody who knows.
So that's the NCLA fee that residents of Los Altos and Los Altos Hills pay to allow the library to be open for extended hours. And that's what NCLA was all about, was to offer more hours to our residents. And John will know,
I don't know.
It was 2010.
and that's for
20 years.
20 years.
Okay. The reason I ask that, and one of the things I'm concerned about, and Cindy, we had a great conversation, and I thank you very much for calling, and you pressed me to tell you things that I was hearing or things that I thought might be negatives or problematic. And the reason I'm going to say some of these things is because you are a phenomenal group. They're looking at the documents here, looking at the work that's going into this. You guys have just done amazing work. You obviously so I admire you for asking for all the kind of negatives up front, and I'm going to try and give you as many as I can think of things that I think would come up or that I've heard. One is that we are probably, given the state legislature, going to be looking at a number of tax issues on the 2020 ballot. And they have to do with things like funding affordable housing issues. It is possible that those taxes will be sufficient that it should be factored into whether or not you're going to have what's called ballot fatigue for tax measures. So I think the big question for me on this actually ties into Hillview, and that is, what library services should be provided in a library building prospectively going forward? And what other community services, which some people would say don't look, sound, smell, and taste like library services, should we provide in a library building versus in a community building? And one of the questions, which has nothing to do with you guys that are involved with this, but one of the questions that we've started talking about, and we've mentioned it at our retreat on priorities, was to what extent does a community center meet the program needs of the programs that we're otherwise holding in Hillview and elsewhere? And is there any other capacity there for absorbing certain programs? Or should we, in fact, be looking at doing something at Hillview that will build some capacity? And if we could do that, does that offload some of what's happening in the library, looking at kind of the total? Because even though you say, well, you know, that one of the premises or one of the things you were told up front was there can't be any cost to the city, there's still cost to the residents.
Right.
And see things like community meeting space, staff meeting space, workroom space, collaborative space, teen space, book sale space, passport services, family restroom, understand that one. And then I get to collection, and I go, oh, that's a library thing. I'm just telling you one way that people can look at this.
Right.
And maybe have some concerns about what are we doing. You know, we do have teen study space at the schools. It's not available at night, right? So you got to kind of be ready with some of that kind of argument. We have, why are we allowing tutors? What kind of tutor things are going on that the community is paying for tutoring space? Are these commercial tutors? Why are we providing commercial tutoring space? I'm telling you the kinds of questions that I think can come up.
That we understand that the community center is supposed to recover most, if not all, of its costs. And so when people go there, they are taking classes, they are paying to have access to that building and the resources. And we don't know if there's going to be space that's not being charged. So, for instance, we currently have a teen room, and that's because the teens have grown up working together in groups. That's how they know how to study. And so they're constantly talking to each other, which is different than the kind of studying that we're seeing out in the open, quiet areas. So that's one dilemma that we have is the community center is currently viewed as a charging center, as in you go there and you will be taking a class. And if we are under a misconception, we need to have that corrected. And then when we look at the other activities in the library, when we say space, it's because things are flexible and things are constantly changing. And actually, All of those things are things that currently are happening in libraries today. We haven't even looked at what we could be doing. I also want to bring to the attention that I know that the city of Cupertino is looking to expand their library, and that's because they need their own orchard room, because they did a joint room with their city hall, and their city hall is using it so often that the library can't have its own programs there. So that's another dilemma: is who trumps who? Who gets first dibs on the space? So
What I would be concerned with, as well as, is why Woodland Library, as well, is not looked at for expansion, because we're forcing everyone to come down to this main library, and the main thing is to provide these opportunities for the whole community. And if we don't have meeting rooms down there, a large meeting room down there, why aren't we considering Woodland as well? Also, they have the space, so I would like to ask that question.
And so Woodland was expanded in 2010, and so it went from small to a little bit bigger. And the dilemma that Woodland has is that there really isn't space to expand. As soon as when you look at the space there, it's very similar to what was talked about earlier today. To go up, all of a sudden it interferes with the residents directly behind them. When you walk out of the back of the Woodland Library, you have, I think, 20 feet before you're in the neighbor's backyard. And the only privacy that currently is there are the redwood trees, so you don't realize the neighbors are quite right there on top of you. The other big issue with Woodland is that there isn't enough parking to expand it. There used to be parking on the street, and that parking was removed in order to put the bicycle lanes in for safety for the children going to schools. So now the neighbor or people that use the library walk or bicycle, or they park on the adjacent streets. They go into the neighborhood to park. So it is a dilemma. There is some remodeling that could happen. We could take some of the lawn area out in the front and build closer out to the sidewalk. But and that is something that we had put in the proposed bond measure, is that some of the funding would go to a remodel for the Woodland Library. I also want to make note that our cities are the only cities that have 2 libraries in our district. Everybody else has a main library. So we're very fortunate that we have this long, narrow Los Altos Hills, and we've been able to do north and south.
Okay. For me, public safety is a very high priority. Our facility servicing our police department, I think, is more in dire need of attention. And I think if we were to support a bond, I would like to see us supporting a bond for our police, a new police station, so that they wouldn't have to be working out of trailers. They're working out of trailers. They're experiencing flooding. So to me, I personally believe that our facilities for our police department would require a higher priority for me to seek a bond measure or support a bond measure for.
I'm sort of a numbers person, and this is the key findings for the 2016 Patron Satisfaction Survey. And in this survey, which I'll be happy to send any of the council members that don't have this, I think that you do have it, though, Los Altos gets a 92% rating in parking availability, quiet areas available, 90% approval rate. The building and facilities are clean, 97% approval rate. Seating workspace are available, 94%. And this is our current library. And the only area which is low is meeting rooms. And when the people in the library, NCLA ask you, they're saying, well, it's not going to cost us anything. Well, I looked at the numbers, and it'll cost at least $404,000 to get this to the point where it could be put on the ballot. And then if we're to believe Kim Cranston from Measure C is going to cost us another $500,000 to put the measure on the ballot. And if you look at the Godby report, at $364 a year, only 44% of the residents said they would support a library bond. So I think that we could easily spend $1 million to put a bond measure on the ballot that people do not have an appetite for. It's not that they don't love the library or they don't think it's valuable. It's because we have increased gas taxes. The Trump tax is going to hit everybody really hard this year. We can't deduct what we used to be able to deduct. Before we would just say, oh, I'll deduct it on my income taxes. So I really think that, just moving forward because of emotions is one thing, but I really think that you people really, really need to dig into the numbers and not spend our staff time. We're part of a system where we can borrow books. We have the Woodland Library. We have the libraries in Cupertino. We have the libraries in Palo Alto. That's why we're part of a system. And the system is working very well, and people are very happy with it. So why should we spend $1 million to find out, do we really need something that's going to cost us $55 million? And people are just not going to have the appetite to spend that kind of money. They just don't have the money to spend because of the finances today. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Phillips. No, thank you. So I'd like to turn it back. I'm concerned is that based on the information provided, we're meeting the needs of our community, and we're doing a great job servicing. But like I said, to me, I would truly support a bond measure for a new police station. But thank you.
Okay, thank you.
So any other further comments? Or?
It's something that people use. Over 500,000 visitors to the library, and 1,462 visitors per day? That's amazing. And people love the library, people use it, and I think it's something that we should be looking at. What we're being asked to do today is not to commit to building a new library or to placing a revenue bond measure on a future ballot, mainly to allow NCLA and the task force to continue to explore the potential for redevelopment. And, I think we should, I'm hoping that we can enthusiastically support this, that unanimously that we can have the full council enthusiastically supporting this with a yes and a please and a thank you to all the volunteers who work so hard at the library, Lolly, the Friends, the Library Commission, and everyone in the community who just really loves the library. So I hope I can convince all of you about that, but because we really need to have the full council here supporting this to move forward.
What about the other facilities and where they rank in terms of dire needs and such? Because ultimately, no matter what we do after the community center, is going to be going out to the taxpayers. And we don't have the money. We're not going to, we don't have another 30 years to try and collect enough, nickels and dimes every year to say, we finally got to a $23 million budget that we can apply to the police department. So I think we have to get real about this. We're going to have to go out to the public. And so the question is, what are the questions we need to ask of our taxpayers and their tolerance, and then are we setting ourselves up for success? Do we need to expand this polling to really try to understand, once again, how our residents rank things like other facilities? So I would put the police department on that list. I would put the library on that list. And I think there's some work that would have to be done by council with what else we would want on there.
But to me, you have a great group of people here ready to work on the library redevelopment. Let's take advantage. They're not asking for staff resources. They're not asking us to do anything. They're saying, we just need you to say, go ahead and do good, and they will run with it. And so I'm excited about this group going to the next step, and they will come back to us. This is something Cindy didn't mention, but I know they plan to keep us updated and come back to us. So every step of the way, if they get to a point where some big decision needs to be made, they're going to come back to us because, as someone pointed out earlier, we own the building. We own the land. And so they really need our approval to get this done. So for the limited ask tonight, I support it 100%. I want you to go out and continue doing the work you're doing. And if we get to the point where we think 2020 is not the right time to go out for the bond, then that's a discussion we'll have at the time. And I agree with Jen. It would be great if we have all 5 of us saying, yes, you have our approval to move to the next phase, because it does send a strong message, and I don't want to see Courtney tomorrow and she's like, well, we got unanimous in Los Altos Hills. I want the same thing that I am for Los Altos, and I just think it would be a wonderful thing. So thank you.
Could I formal motion here?
I think they want a formal motion. My concern, Jeannie, my concern is I feel kind of like when CASA came up at the MTC and ABAG. I want to support going forward, but I don't want it seen as an endorsement of the project. Okay, so that's kind of where I am.
Can I try a motion here? As I think it's pretty simple. I think it's pretty simple, and it's right here on our agenda. So I think the motion would be make a motion to support the council support the North County Library Authority continuing to explore the potential redevelopment of the main library. I think that's the ask. That's the whole thing. All of these questions are what they're going to explore. So I don't want to limit them with our motion. It needs to be pretty similar to what Los Altos Hills did. Otherwise, so let's have them continue to explore the potential redevelopment. And Cindy was taking copious notes, as was Marlene, about what the other concerns were. So I think that it just adds to what they're going to look into.
Given your description meets my need, even though your motion just leaves all of that out, I'm going to still support this because everyone can go back to the tape and then looking at some of the direction in terms of how to expand their exploration.
We have a motion and a second. Roll call.
Councilmember Enander,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Pepper,
Yes.
Councilmember Bruins, Councilmember Fligor,
Yes.
Mayor Lee-Eng.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Okay, let's move on to